The running sheet says 6 o'clock and it's 6 o'clock. So that's good to see. My name is Peter Williams. I'm the chair of the board of directors of the Australian Tapestry Workshop. And my task here tonight is to make sure that we actually follow the running sheet and deliver another wonderful evening at the Tapestry Workshop. Very special evening tonight, which is a lecture by Reiko Sudo. So in terms of starting the evening, what I would like to do first of all is to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land that the workshop stands on, and pay my tributes to their elders past and present. We have some dignitaries here tonight which are important to acknowledge as well. I'm not sure whether Bales is here yet, but our patron Banyan Maya AC, Reiko Sudo, Dr. Dean Sherman, Greg Andrews, why is that doing that? Greg Andrews, Director, Sector Investment, Creative Victoria, members of the Tapestry Foundation of Australia, fellow members of the Australian Tapestry Workshop Board of Directors, friends of the Australian Tapestry Workshop. I always see it as an acronym, so I should actually pronounce it in full. Elaine Davies, donor, councillor Anita Holworth, Emeritus Professor Andrea Hull. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Arnold Handcock, OBE, who has made this evening possible. Thank you very much. Look, I've been involved with the workshop for 15 years or so now, and I must say that one of the things that is ever impressive down here is the commitment by everybody in the place to delivering work of significant standard. Standard that can really cut with the best in the world in textile art. We collaborate with each other, we collaborate with artists, and the relationship between the Australian Tapestry Foundation and the Australian Tapestry Workshop is a very strong one and mutually supportive. I think without that mutual trust and the sort of shared aspiration to deliver, it would be much harder to really equip the work that we have done over the years. Next year, in case some of you don't know, it's 40 years since the workshop was established in 1976, and that's a very significant milestone for us. And there will be a very interesting program of events next year to celebrate that. One of the things that 40 years of work has delivered is probably 11 tapestries through our embassies throughout the world. Significant works of huge scale, modest scale, in various locations representing this country in a way, in a cultural setting that most other gifts and representations of our country can't do. They're sort of wonderful assets, and they are sort of crowning pieces that happen at consulates and embassies throughout the world, from New York through to the Holy See, Dublin, Washington, and the most recent one was a wonderful contemporary Indigenous work that's now in the Singapore embassy, run and designed by Brooke Andrew. So not only are we dealing with, in our embassy works, Indigenous commitment and artists, but we're also dealing with celebrating the great creativity that happens in this location, a deep knowledge and skill, our dyeing technology, which happens in the little room at the back with our 72 colours, 371 colours. I was thinking when I first got my box of 72 Derwents, I was really impressed. And seeing the 371 that come out of that little room in the cones at the front really is a wonderful thing. There is something about the work that happens in here that has a great deal of alchemy that is more than the sum of its parts, and I think the weavers have such a great ability to interpret, move from something which is a small sketch a painting on a tile or a full-scale image and collaborate and turn it into an absolutely unique work of art in textile. We pride ourselves on collaborating with live artists. We don't do still images. It's actually about a connection with living artists and living people. So we value that highly. As I said, I think the support of the TFA has been wonderful. The Australian Tapestry Workshop has been a great beneficiary of their largesse, and in the last couple of years, I think with some initiatives that we've made some inroads into creating an awareness of the workshop in areas to do with architecture and interior. And recently we just finished running a national competition that saw a wonderful tapestry come out of that competition, and we hope to actually have that woven for the 2016 year. I'm just looking at the time here. I really would like now to introduce Antonia Syme. Antonia Syme is the director of the workshop, and she will make some comments about Arnold and then introduce the Reiko. Thank you.
Well, honoured guests, it gives me very great pleasure to be introducing our Handcock fellow Reiko Sudo tonight. Her visit would not have been possible without the extraordinary generosity of Arnold Handcock, our former chairman of our board and our foundation, who's established this fellowship to assist in bringing experts from around the world to Melbourne to share their vision and knowledge with us. So Arnold, we thank you very much for your wonderful legacy. We also have many special donors and supporters here tonight, without whom the ATW really would not be what it is today. Bales and Sarah Meyer, Janet and John Calvert-Jones, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, Susan Morgan, Elaine and Alan Davies, just to mention a few. And I'm absolutely delighted that Dean Sherman could be here tonight to introduce, to open the exhibition. Jean's contribution to so many fields, particularly the arts, is inspirational. She and I also go back very many years, and Reiko and Jean have also known each other for many years, so it was a really perfect synergy. So thank you so much, Jean. Reiko's presence here tonight is a dream come true. We met 2 years ago when we were giving a presentation at an AG Ideas conference, and we shared an instant rapport and fantasised about bringing Reiko back here to talk about the extraordinary work that Reiko does with NUNO Corporation. She's utterly extraordinary. She is an amazing innovator in her field of textiles. She's an artist, a designer, a design technologist, a fashion designer, teacher, and generally all-round genius, I think. Her practice really does cross so many boundaries and has been instrumental in inspiring so many people's artistic practice around the world, not just in Australia. She's always pushing boundaries, she's extraordinarily innovative, she takes risks, and she is always bringing new vision to her practice. Her enthusiasm for this project, including the exhibition and pop-up shop, which I can't recommend highly enough, was really infectious, and her enthusiasm really made this happen. So Reiko, thank you for your commitment and enthusiasm for this project. It's been such an honour to work with you. Our team has been thrilled by this whole extraordinary event. So thank you so much for coming to tell us your wonderful story. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Reiko Sudo to you, our Handcock.
こんばんはですね。Hello, my name is Reiko Sudo of NUNO Corporation. First of all, I'd like to express how wonderful it is to be here. I'm here today thanks to Antonia, director of the Australian Tapestry Workshop, who I met in 2013 at an international design conference called AG Ideas, and which is the biggest design conference in the world. We both were giving talks and have enjoyed sharing time together ever since. Meeting others always lead to new directions and for this deep bond, especially among textile people. Perhaps it's just the common thread of our interest, or perhaps because textile throughout the ages in whatever local are so very close to our lives. Today I'd like to talk about NUNO, which I've been running for 32 years now, and tell you about how our approach to textile has changed with the times. Since 1984, NUNO has worked within Japan to create some 2,500 textiles, many of which are now in the collection of some 35 museums worldwide. In 1982, I happened into a gallery and was blown away by what I saw. This is the fabric I saw at the time, and it's very, very complicated and different structure used in Comme des Garçons, Paris collection that year, said to be the first ever jacquard room structure designed by computer. Like this felt with large holes, Le Monde, French newspaper, hated clothes with holes, though in fact the holes were in the fabric. I just had to know the designer. It was Junichi Arai, textile planner to big name designers Isumiyake, Reiko Sudo, and Yoji Yamamoto. So, and yet I was shocked to see Arai's machine room's textile looking more handmade than my own. So another felted fabric, which designed by Junichi Arai. After this gallery encounter, I teamed up with Arai to open a meeting place for textile makers and visitors. In the first day of personal photocopiers, Arai rendered African ikat patterns into a computer jacquard, a weave. This textile is in many museum collections around the world. This is a NUNO as it looks in 1984, full of indigo and unbleached fabric. This is my very first museum collection textile, picked up by the Smithsonian. Now that film camera, no, sorry, didn't show the writing. So, all the film camera have all disappeared. The design is a kind of fossil. So combining yarns with two different shrink ratios made this weave buckle up a cedar pattern with a check, chosen for the collection of the V&A Museum in London. In 1987, Arai quit NUNO and I took over. People said I'd lucky to keep it going for 3 years. But we are now in our 32nd year. Up until then, Arai invented the structure and I did the designing, but now began doing everything. My aim for NUNO was to many high-tech with traditional Japanese weaving and dyeing, an approach that still guided us today. This was woven with stainless steel, microfiber, and selected immediately for the collection of the St. Louis Museum. Using a German technique called sputtering, we vacuum steamed particles of nickel, chrome, and steel onto polyester to create stainless steel. This textile is a collection of MoMA, the museum, and the V&A, and the many other museums. This miracle year, 1989, shocked the world. The Berlin Wall, Tenements, In keeping with these changes, we bonded news clippings from around the world onto cloth to make this agate fab, now in the MoMA and St. Louis Art Museum collections. Here we first tried stamping Western paper onto cloth, but it just dissolved. So we used rayon, which is also made from wood pulp, and it worked fine in the MoMA collection. Calendaring is a process for finishing textile to a high gloss under high pressure and heat, like what happened to sports uniforms that get rubbed smooth. This is in the permanent collection of the Museum of Fine Art, Boston. This fabric was made for theater seating. I learned through this project, if the fabric treated rubbed hardly, then all the durability tests passed easily. So the entire whole took on a beautiful gradation. In 1993, I designed this fabric with feather floating in sheer organza pocket, my very first production in a kimono weaving town. It took 5 years to realize, after visiting different mills all over Japan with handmade mock-ups. Nothing but rejects, until finally I had to camp up at one mill and insert the feathers myself while they stopped and restarted the loom. All the feathers were from far for restaurant. The combination hand and the machine processes become an instant trademark for NUNO. Now it's in over 20 collections worldwide. Iron oxide, your common rust, can indelibly stain fabrics. This led us to invent a very primitive but sure fire method of printing dye. Many different free-form patterns can be simply by varying the placement of metal scraps and length of weathering time. The 1990s were our hybrid textile era. We made textile with metal, paper, packing tapes, all sorts of crazy materials. We often use paper in our textile like the stone paper in the collection of the Philadelphia Museum of Art and 4 other places. Handmade from kozo mulberry fibers, extremely durable. Mino washi was traditionally used for making shifu, paper cloth. Here was thin washi strip between layers of silk organza, creating paper reminiscent of flowing water. This fabric started as a failure. We tried to weave polyester taffeta, but it kept tearing. We decided to cut the damaged portion into 4mm and 8mm thread yarns. Using a water-soluble yet stretchy backing fabric made from the same stuff as laundry starch. We sewed down ribbon to make a lace-like pattern, then washed away the backing. A German technique called chemical lace from 1864, though originally they used silk washed away with lye. Around this time, we bonded, burned and tortured textile to create all sorts of unique design, pure aesthetic experiment with no obvious useful application. Many of our textile in the 1990s used Japanese wash paper. Here we silk screened a binder onto linen, then pressed down sheet of washi by hand, then washed away fibers from unglued area, leaving the pattern in paper. In 1998, MoMA in New York launched a major exhibition of Japanese textiles, which included 25 of our textiles. The show then traveled all over and really helped to put NUNO on the map. We've made in many different textiles with metal wire, copper, brass, steel, stainless steel, microfibers for radial tires. This microfiber are as supple as cotton, but heavy as steel, which is hard on the loom. But somehow we've managed 3 repeat productions so far, each time at different mills. No one ever wants to do it again. After weaving, we finished the surface with a broad torch to get rainbow discoloration like on pots and pans. In 2000, with support from the Kyoto city government, I had my first solo show in Kyoto. A big-scale show with over 200 pieces of different textiles and special installation in an old converted school. The show later traveled to Tokyo, Kyushu, and Santa Barbara in America. From 1987 to 2000, I also got work with major architects like Toyo Ito, Kengo Kuma, and Jun Aoki, which provided steady income and encouragement and the strength to become who I am today. Work in interior textile gave me a great appreciation for the aesthetics and practicalities of transforming spaces with fabric. This tape twist fabric embroidered with 8mm taffeta tape, which I informed, was used by architect Jun Aoki for a window coupling at his Louis Vuitton Omotesando boutique. What started out as a way to recoup damaged polyester taffetas has been used in so many civic facilities since 2002. So by now, we have to make taffeta tape, especially to make the material. Oh, again, for some 3,000 air conditioning baffled in the top of the ceiling in the Showa Kinen Park Museum by architect Toyo Ito. No two baffles are the same size, so it took 2 months to make and install. Stitched together in a lace-like way with a special steering wheel embroidery machine, typically used for uchikake wedding kimono. Here the design plays on roll-up patterns viewed in spiral cross-section. This textile is mounted on the ceiling of a resort hotel lobby near Tokyo Disneyland. As the 1990s came to a close, a new era in textile began. We became more aware of our limited natural resources, the excess of products we consume and throw away. A new technology was invented for completely recycling petroleum, polyester, and nylons. So we changed to this new system to help relieve Japan's dependence on fossil fuels. Based on our patented origami pleats technique from the 1990s, 10 years on, we added heat cut bent to the pleats to create a net-like design. So using the same hand-cut origami pleats technique, we created a huge tapestry and 40 lanterns for the Anna Hotel in Tokyo. Sorry, all the writing part are cut, sorry. One of my favorite technique is to leave warps and wefts loose so they float off the fabric surface. Ribbons, loop yarn, strips of washi paper, anything will do. Here we took a hint from flat packing tape and stiffened cotton warps with cognac, gratinum yarn gel made out of roots of the plant, like a potato plant. Traditionally used to waterproof handmade papers, then floated it and cut it by hand. This glow in the dark. Fabric is made of fibers that store daylight and release energy at night. One of the pieces in the gallery, I think in the midnight, only one piece will be glowing in the dark. Maybe someone can get into the gallery and check. Please. So in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. By 2004, the company 20 we'd amassed a mountain of fabric scraps and remnants. We had to do something, so we created a series of tsugihagi patchwork fabrics. It took plenty of hands-on labor cutting swatches and stitching them together, but we now have several varieties on this style, all selected by the Museum of Fine Art Boston and other collections. We've gotten a lot of mileage out of the chemical lace technique for reusing fabric discards. In 2013, we made a patchwork tapestry for the new preeminence of the famous old-time Japanese sweet store, Toraya. In 2005, NUNO is celebrating 21st anniversary. And I received an award from British Art Council to do a traveling show in Europe. It was a major exhibition that traveled to over 3 years. Between 2 UK locations, to Austria, so we made a big column like a tree, so I can easily like stretch or shrink based on the space. So that was easy to pack and easy to travel. So, and Germany, then to museum in Japan as well. So the show featured the fabric forest, installation of 1.5 diameter, 6 meter tall textile crowns. In 2006, we undertook a huge hotel project, designing all the interior textile and incidental decorative items for the newly built Mandarin Oriental Tokyo, a foreign-owned hotel chain. But the project director respectfully insisted on commissioning Japanese artisans throughout, for which I'm grateful to this day. So 50 different factories are working for Mandarin Oriental Tokyo at the time. It was really, really great project. And now they're celebrating 10th anniversary, and we will kind of create textile. So it took 10 years before we succeeded making this embroidery. It's difficult to see the detail. Fabric with dangling bits. You can see these little things here. So by 2008, as much as possible, we used natural fibers and byproducts. Organic heritage cotton, flax, and hemp are more pest resistant and eco-friendly. They also make for more unique creative design. Polyester, remember, shapes when heated. So we apply this property to create origami pleats and tanabata using paper template to mold the fold. I won't go into detail, but with this new process, we can now weave, pick, and valet fold right on the loom without paper. The woven fabric automatically shrink up in fold in hot water. Since 2008, we have been committed to reducing waste from spinning and milling processes. One big project focuses on making use of the protective outer surface layers of silk cocoon known as kibiso. Typically discarded and too tough to loom. It was love at first sight. I was captivated. I immediately felt inspired to do something with this waste. I took some home and right away began talking to 2 companies, trying to get them to experiment with the material. Unfortunately, the fiber were too heavy and hard. They wouldn't spool on the shuttle, and they damaged slicer blade. So both companies gave up. I started a kibiso hand weaving project among the local retired women of Tsuruoka, where the silk mill located. And in 2010, the fashion brand Hunting World began selling the kibiso bags they made. These women set up their loom in garage or storeroom or corner of their kitchen to make handcraft to add to the family income, and they could make good use of kibiso yarn, which is too coarse for machine looming, and also hand knitted hat and cap we made, and also little sandals. So still kibiso weaving was very difficult. I finally got someone in the Tsuruoka Weaving Corporation to find a way to refine the fibers. Again by hand, down to 500 deniers, which was still too thick for automatic machine looming. Working with elderly town folk from one of the last remaining silk lading area in Japan, for the last 7 years, we've made a whole line of different kibiso products, many of which are now in the permanent collection of the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York. Kibiso is made of sericin protein. The cocoon as a whole is 25% sericin and 75% fibroin. The hard sericin shell serving to protect the delicate Suzushi fiber inside. This textile of Suzushi warp and kibiso weft was selected 2 years ago for the permanent collection of the Boston Museum of Fine Art. A plain weave or ganji made with a thread of kibiso, the outmost layers of the silk cocoon, weft crossing left and right, create a knot-like effect. In the high mountain Azumino plain of central Japan, farmers still preserve the tradition of raising the original wide variety of silkworms to produce natural silk. The raw silk strains, the cocoon is beautiful, almost fluorescent green, not seen in domesticated silkworms. The wild silkworms raised entire by hand feed on sort of oak leaves, not mulberry. The oak growth must be carefully managed and covered with netting to keep crows from eating the cocoons. So for the last 2 years, we have been developing textile using this Azumino natural silk. It's really nice green color here. So this is one of these designs featuring the color of the natural silk paired with raw silk spun at the Usui mill and finished by local kimono weavers in Gunma as a special limited production. So in 2000, we held our first show in Kyoto, the Mecca for weavers and dyers throughout Japan, and were met with strong criticism that we had bastardized tradition. So not nice news, very distressing in fact, but many curators and researchers from elsewhere around the world saw the show and were favorably impressed enough to invite us to exhibit. Since then, we've been showing regularly, leading up to this talk today. In 2008, we did a textile installation at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. These Japanese, three Japanese, Tadao Ando, Yayoi Kusama, and myself, were selected to do gallery displays. We did a textile installation at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Everyone enjoyed the fun-filled atmosphere. 6 years later, last May, we exhibited our koi nobori, koi carp fish again at the Musée Guimet in Paris, adding another 20 banners for a total of 89. They would be swimming. They did swimming until August 31, so it was like four months exhibition. Started from May 5th, it's Boys' Day in Japan. It was a wonderful show. 3 years ago, this Zoku exhibition traveled between Wales and Scotland, Devonport studio, textile displays in toga fashion. Just draping textile on hangers gave a good sense of how they look on the body, overlapping in layers inside and out. A very simple but effective display, and it made it very easy for the show to travel. Weaving areas are rapidly disappearing in Japan. We actively try to keep them alive. Drawing on local artisan talents and traditional skills to create new living textiles. Design is forever changing the taste, interest, and technologies of the times. Expressing new and renewed contribute important aesthetic and ethical judgment. We changed direction many times, even since the turn of the 21st century. We are always viewing each new development as an opportunity to contribute important aesthetic and ethical judgment. So it's repeated the same. Our guiding values is awareness of our finite planet. We are trying to focus on recycle and using things as far as they can go, or again, to revitalize older lines of work that have receded into the background of recent trends. These decades have tended progressively toward deeper crossover current in design. NUNO is small and we can only do so much, but I want to continue working as long as we can to create textiles in Japan with local artisans and technicians. I'm happy if I can enrich people's life with beautiful, useful things and colorful, compatible spaces. I see my design work as a way of linking people to people and Japan to the world. Thank you for listening to my talk today. I hope you can take home something of the texture of our work and weave meaningful connections with your own sense of place. Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Reiko. That was absolutely wonderful. I think you treated us to a continually evolving set of works of genius, really, and I think they are underpinned by such high-level sensibilities, ethical pursuits, a deep and abiding understanding of tradition, and I think an ability to exploit mistake or failure and turn it into triumph. I mean, it was extraordinary. Thank you very much. I noted the first textile that you showed from '82 called cast concrete from the first designer. That's right. And being an architect, I responded to that, but was very uplifted by the work that as it evolved. Reiko has said she would take some questions, so can I call for questions from anybody? Jane.
Do I need a microphone? No. I can shout.
I think you can
shout, yeah. I want to know, Reiko, who designs those exhibitions, like the carp exhibition? I mean, you've designed the textiles, but who designs those installations?
Actually, the carp installation, I worked with French architects, Adrien Garnered, and we worked together in Washington, D.C. And then the curator saw the installation, and she wanted to do the same thing, but spaces are different, but luckily France. And Adrien also helped to. Yes.
So different people.
It's the same people for the carp.
And for the other show?
Other shows are different. Toyo Ito did the Kyoto show, and we kind of like a collaboration. Yes.
Are there any other questions? Hold on the microphone. Back to the room. No question.
Recycling. What do you use in the recycling? What materials do you recycle? Is it bottles or wool, or when you were talking about recycling?
In Japan, we have a very, very strict rule, and we are not able to. Well, from the beginning, we are using like a PET bottle to make a polyester. But after 2003, all the textile can chemically recyclable. And since then, we are not able to use PET bottle. So PET bottle has to be PET bottle. And fabric has to be fabric. So each industry has to follow your own a field. So, and we uses polyester eco-circle system since 2003. So all the polyester material can recyclable, 100%. But the natural fiber, of course, you can use as a wiping cloths, and even like, of course, you can burn everything. Is that, yeah? Is that correct answer? I hope.
Another question from the front.
Reiko-san, I'm very interested in the beautiful green silk cocoons that you described in the mountains, and also if you might tell us a little bit more about some of the industries that are struggling, some of the very old silk weaving industries that are struggling to survive in Japan, that you're obviously very conscious about, you know.
Well, actually, silk is the only last, industry Japanese government support. So if Japanese government didn't support, the old cocoon will be cost 10 times than the Chinese or Brazilian or Thai or Vietnam silk. But the government still support, and we still have 2 mills spinning mills in entire Japan. One is located in Gunma Prefecture. It's about 2 hours north from Tokyo, and the other one is Yamagata. And Gunma produce 70% of silk material for a Japanese traditional kimono, and 30% done by Yamagata, which is the most north area which textile industry can still survive. So only 2 industries. So I've been helping this small one because they will be shrink. Yes, and this Nagano Azumino wild silk, only one farm. It's really, and the whole kimono will cost 2 million yen because only how much? It's really tiny bit of silk cocoon, but still supporting the government. And I really hope Japanese government keep supporting, because wool industry gone and the cotton gone, and the linen was our tradition, but linen already gone 5 years ago. So only silk still produced in Japan. Everything we imported. So linen imported from Russia or mid-Europe, and rami also imported from China and Korea, and the wool, of course, imported from your country and New Zealand. Yeah, I really hope. I'm very into a silk industry right now.
Another question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have you collaborated with any fashion designers on special custom-made textiles?
Very difficult question. Well, why Alai-san left NUNO? Because of the he was making textile for many fashion designers, but fashion design business is so tough and so difficult, and he kind of gave up. Even very high level people, but the cost and the deadline and everything is so tough, and we really gave up. It's really difficult, so difficult. But in entire Japanese textile industry, many high fashion from Europe and America visited factory and ordering the textile. Many. So we are still happy. But in local fashion designer, even like Issey Miyake and Comme des Garçons and Yoji, are not really using the complicated textile. And especially Reiko, Comme des Garçons, she has her own people. So, and completely protected. So few of our subcontract weaver working with Comme des Garçons, but it's very strict, and they completely covered the room and space. And after they finished the production, Comme des Garçons sent few staff members to clean up the factory, and never ever left any piece of. It's fantastic, fantastic.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Collaborating with fashion designers, I'm very interested in the nature of the collaboration between the architects you mentioned. So, what is the sort of common thread to realising a project between, say, working with Ito and yourself to deliver a space?
Because architect projects will have a long term. So started from 5 years before the actual building set up, building up. So we could communicate, and not so many variation. So that's easy. And for me, it's much comfortable to work with. Sorry. Yeah, architects. Well, I had a very bad a memory and experience working with the fashion designer. But it's not everyone, but some took the ideas and reproduced in China, and we had even I patented the technique. But it's really because always time and always concerned about the price, and they are sourcing most. So I understand, but it's not my.
There's a very strong structural things in your fabrics, which really architects do understand and respond to. So.
Yeah, and I really learned a lot from Ito-san and Junaoki and Sejima-san and so on. Many. Sorry.
So have you been able to win over the detractors from the traditional Japanese weaving enterprises that disapprove of your use of innovative materials?
A little difficult. Would you please? Well, my English has a limitation, 12 years old.
I think it was in Kyoto. You were at an exhibition or a meeting place of other weaving companies, other weavers, and they didn't approve of your company.
They said you weren't traditional enough.
Yeah.
Remember you told us. Yes.
Have you been able to win them over? Do they approve of you now?
Good question. 2 years ago, I got the offer from Kyoto government again to do working with the weaver in Kyoto. So I'm so happy. But when I did the one-man show in Kyoto, and Kunihiko Moriguchi, he is the national living treasure in using dyer, as a using dyer. And he told me, Reiko, listen, you have to be careful. I will tell you, maybe only 5 people can agree with your exhibition, but other people will say negative comment. I can tell you, don't get upset. But it was really true. It was so hard. It's really needle on the floor, kind of. But this is a Japanese expression.
Yeah. walking on eggshells.
Yeah. But now they invited me to work with the local people. So the show will be opened up 14th of October. So that's why the day after tomorrow.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions. This one here.
I just wanted to know, excluding the weavers, how big is your team that you want to do?
NUNO team? I have a 12 member, full-time 12 member, only 12. And part-time, about 10 for selling in the department store. So it's still really, really small. I wanted to be big, but I don't know why. I don't have any talent to expand my business. Well, small is beautiful, as I always said myself. But luckily I'm here, and the exhibit, NUNO Textile, and please buy something after this talk.
One final question, please. Okay. Do you hold?
When you get an idea for a completely new fabric, is it difficult to find a manufacturer open with an open mind to try a new idea?
It's not easy. So sometimes like spending, and we are still finding the origami printed technique. So we've done everything by hand. And we actually asked weaver to weave, but whole a process of finishing, we had to buy ourselves. Even like a 300 meter or 400 meter, sometimes 1,000 meter for hotel project, I had to do everything by hand.
With the heat molding fabric, you do all that by hand?
Yes, by hand, everything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reiko, for asking the questions, for answering the questions, and thank you to the audience for asking them. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dean Sherman. Now, I hadn't met Jean until this evening, and I've been faced with a formidable CV.
Please don't read.
I'm not going to. I was about to say that I'm taking the minimalist position, giving you the short story. So if I can just say that Dr. Dean Sherman is Chairman and Executive Director of the Sherman Contemporary Art Foundation, a Sherman family philanthropic enterprise dedicated to the public exhibition of significant contemporary art from Australia and the Asia-Pacific region. She assumed this role following 21 years as a director of the proprietor of the Sherman Galleries. And I think one of the interesting things that I would like to point out from this CV, if there's only one more paragraph I can read, is during her directorship of Sherman Galleries, assisted by a staff of up to 13 people, Dr. Sherman initiated and organised 12 to 16 Sydney-based exhibitions annually, as well as Australian and international touring exhibitions aimed at foregrounding Australian contemporary art and connecting with art and artists in the Asia-Pacific region. Jean told me before that she has known Reiko since 1988, I think it was, and so there's a terribly long connection here. And with her great CV and knowledge of Reiko, I would like to invite her to open the exhibition, please.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was some talk. And I've known Reiko. I can't work out exactly when we met, sometime in the late 80s. And I had an idea as to what she was doing and what she'd done. And, you know, when you go and see her, the shop is tiny. It's not much bigger than this area here. And you have all these bolts of cloth piled up. but you don't really understand what has been achieved except through your eyes, aesthetically and visually, but not in terms of outreach. So thank you, Antonia, for inviting me. It's such an honour to be included in an event here. I've been here only once before, but I'm very aware of the work of the Tapestry Workshop, and in any way to be connected with Reiko, it's an enormous honour for me. I would have flown, I said to Peter, from London if I had been asked to do this. That's how pleased I am to be here. And thanks, Peter, for that generous, thank God it didn't go on longer introduction. My interest in Japan goes back a long way to 1987, and I took an interest initially in Japanese art, textiles, fashion design, and architecture. And I met Reiko very soon after my first visit to Japan in 87. I can't pinpoint it exactly, but it wasn't long afterwards, maybe 88, perhaps 89, not later. For those who don't know, I started my professional life as a university teacher, teaching French literature. And I taught in South Africa, you can hear from my accent where I grew up, and then came to Sydney University. And it was at a time, many of you will remember, looking at the demographic here, will remember a moment when Australia turned its attention economically and also politically and even philosophically to Asia. And there was a kind of shift in perspective. I don't know if you were Australian and you grew up here, whether you were as aware of that shift as I was. Well, I was particularly aware of it since I lost my job because of it. French literature was not as needed after 5 years of presence in Australia as it had been when I first arrived. I wasn't, thankfully, the only person to lose my job. There were, when I arrived at Sydney University, there were 20 of us from junior through to professorial level, and when I left 5 years later, there were 8. So we lost 12 people, and the French department went from 800 to 220 students. And where did they all go? They went to learn Japanese and Indonesian in those days, and of course nowadays those that are able enough go and learn Chinese. It's more difficult. I took a job at Ascham School. Some of you will know Ascham who've lived in Sydney or know something about Sydney. A very famous girls' school, and I was head of modern languages there, and I hired my first, well, it was the first Japanese teacher and Indonesian teacher in the school, but the Japanese teacher was a ballet dancer, former ballet dancer. Ballet, you can't go on beyond, late 30s or something. And she had married an Australian journalist whom she'd met during her ballet career. She had never been in an Australian school before. She was an older woman by then, and I think I really became very connected to Japan via Haruko Robinson, her name was. Peter Robinson was her husband, he was a journalist, because she hung on to me sort of desperately from the moment I arrived at school in the morning to the moment I left in the afternoon. She really was very lost, and I was her conduit to the world of Australian education. Well, by the time I had I'd run a full cycle at the school, taking first formers to sixth form, I decided that I didn't want to do it again. I didn't want to become a headmistress or anything like that, or go into the bureaucracy, and I decided to move into the gallery world. Now, I had little training. My father was a collector. He collected Persian rugs and pop graphics and South African contemporary art. My mother was one of 4 girls, and this is relevant to Japan. Her middle sister was an artist. There was an older one, a younger one, and my mother and Sylvia, an exhibiting artist, not famous, but a regularly exhibiting artist in Johannesburg. And I did do history of art as an undergraduate at university, but I took the French literature further and further. Come to textiles, my grandmother raised these 4 daughters, older, going down. She lost 2 husbands and she raised them sewing. She was a seamstress. And she raised 4 girls. My mother was 13 when her father died, which was the first marriage. And my grandmother earned enough, barely, but earned enough to raise 4 daughters. She sent the oldest one to university simply by sewing. And when her 4 daughters married, my mother being one of them, she had no money, my grandmother, and she moved from daughter to daughter for 3 months at a time. And so she came to us for 3 months of every year. And what I started to, with her sewing machine, and it was one of those sewing machines where you turned a handle and you did this with your foot. Yes. And that was the only sewing machine, I don't know. There weren't any others, I guess, at the time. Anyway, what I did was I had a basket, similar to those baskets under the spools of thread there, with all the fabrics that I wanted to for her to make into things for me, and things that I cut out of magazines. And my mother would say to me, she has done this all her life, she's exhausted, you are not to give her so much work. And so in the end, instead of getting her, because she could cut out a pattern from anything, from a magazine image, I would take my existing clothes and redesign them using the fabrics that I had created. So you see, had I not had that French literature career, I would have either been an architect, Peter. I don't think my maths would have been good enough, but I might have been a fashion designer or a textile designer, nothing like Reiko. So I looked forward to her coming every 3 months, and it was a wonderful kind of relationship that I developed with her as the two of us pored over the dining room table. My mother's skill was aesthetic as well in many ways. She loved gardening, and she was always seen, remember this was South Africa, we had staff, but the gardener, Gabriel, and her were always seen crouched in the garden in deep discussion as to whether to put the purple here and something else, yellow in another corner. So between my father collecting, my artist aunt, who was very close, and my mother gardening, and my grandmother sewing, I think it all came together in some, blend that led me to standing in front of you tonight. Now, I don't think that Bales and Sarah are here, no. But Bales had a connection, Bale Meyer, with Celia Winter Irving, who, a family connection, I think, quite far removed, but definitely there. And I took over, after leaving Ascom, Celia Winter Irving's sculpture gallery in Glebe. Celia is no longer alive. She went to live in Zimbabwe. And really, in a way, I took the gallery over because I didn't want to teach. I'd started translating a book from French into English, and I didn't like the book that much. And so I was a little bored, and I started going to the galleries because I had more leisure time, which was something I'd done since childhood. And Celia disappeared to Africa, from which place she never really returned. And I took over the gallery. Basically, I took it over. It was a sculpture gallery to tidy it up. I'm a very tidy person, and it was in a muddle. So I decided I had to tidy it, and then I would move on to some other endeavour. And here, 30 years later, I'm still in the gallery. My first trip to Japan, as I said, was 1987 with an exhibition called 40 Painter Sculptors at the Saitama Museum on the outskirts of Tokyo. I had 2 sculptors. I hadn't shown them yet, but I was thinking of showing them. The late Akio Makigawa, Melbourne-based, and very tragically died in his early 50s of cancer, and Hussein Valamanesh, who's alive and well and lives in Adelaide. And in 1985, this is 2 years before I took over the gallery, I found, because I had a bit more time, I found myself in a little boutique called Rhonda Parry in Transvaal Avenue, Double Bay. For those of you who know Double Bay, it's just a little sort of interesting little lane off one of the main streets. It was run by the woman after whom it was named, Rhonda Parry. She was never there. The door was always closed. But if you managed to find the 5 minutes in the day when she actually was in her store, there were some very interesting things. And I bought a jacket, a leather jacket. Nowadays, I prefer not to wear leather, but I bought a leather jacket with one sleeve I asked who the designer was, and it was sewn in the label by a Japanese man whom I'd never heard of called Issey Miyake. I asked around, this is 1985, and nobody knew anything about him. Remember, no technology, there were only magazines, there was no one to ask, really. Then remember, I went to Japan 2 years later for this 40 painter sculpture show, and I went actually with Doug Hall, but that's another story. And I found that although that everybody said, oh, Miyake, yes, he had been showing in Paris since the 70s, and I had already added to the repertoire the Comme des Garçons, Reiko Sudo and Yohji Yamamoto. I was really disappointed and felt sad to hear from Reiko that her relationship with the fashion industry has been fraught. Looking at her face, I could tell that it was more fraught probably than we were led to understand in a public forum. But I can understand it. It is a cutthroat industry, and it's very hard to survive. Anyway, these three luminaries, Miyake, Reiko Sudo, and so on, introduced me not just to Japanese fashion, but to Japanese textiles. I started understanding what was different about Japan, holes and torn things and threads that came out. And I started going to Japan very regularly, as Peter said, taking shows of Australian art and bringing shows back from not just Japan, China and all over Asia, Korea, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on, Indonesia. And to date, I've been to Japan 48 times. The last time I saw Reiko was this year. I've been twice already this year. Well, I gave the prize. I got a prize and I gave a prize. Reiko had made a little dog, just a dog like this, out of textiles, a most gorgeous little dog, which was to be given as a prize to an artist who was awarded first place at the Tokyo Art Fair. And I chaired the jury of who allocated the prize, and we gave the prize to Iwasaki-san, Takashi, and what he got was this gorgeous little NUNO dog. And then I think there was a check to it, I hope so, I can't quite remember. But anyway, he thrilled beyond. If any of you follow me or would like to follow me on Instagram, you'll see a picture of me giving this little NUNO dog, well, it wasn't that little, it was about this big, quite big actually, to this sculptor who grasped it like that and had a smile bigger than sunshine. And I received a prize as well, but that's another story. Sana gave me a prize, but this is about Reiko. So, I'd seen her almost every time I'd gone to Japan, 48 times. I don't think I ever went to Tokyo without going to NUNO. I bought my son a fabric, the feather fabric that Reiko showed and mentioned that she had to create mostly by hand for my son's wedding. I don't know if you ever realized that. Reiko, and I wore it for Emil, my son's wedding. I had something made, and then our family started this animal protection institute called Voiceless, that some of you might know of, which is all about protecting farm animals and improving their lives and getting them out of factory farms, basically. And every time I wore this dress, my husband got upset about the feathers. So I gave it to the Powerhouse Museum. Anyway, I wanted to just share with you in the last few minutes before I declare the show open something about what I've learned with regard to Japanese aesthetics. If anybody is interested in Japanese aesthetics and how it differs from Western aesthetics, philosophically and in terms of look, there's a very important book which many of you might have read, but just in case, called In Praise of Shadows. It was written by a writer called Junichiro Tanizaki in 1933. And I've read a huge amount of Japanese literature translated into English, but this book, literature was my thing, and so I just keep reading. But this book has absolutely encapsulated for me, and it never changes. I read it and reread it, how Japan, in its essence, differs from the Western world in terms of the way various things are approached, not just textiles. And this is what comes out of the book. I'll give you just a few examples. It's a slight little book. Has anybody here read it? Well, a few people have. It's highly recommended if you want to understand Japan. Just take a rather, banal subject, perhaps a bit unsavory, toilets, and think, Peter, on the architectural side, or other architects in the room, that Western toilets have white tiles, bright lights, silvery features, and in Japan, the traditional toilet, we're not talking about how it's evolved towards Western thinking, had fine quality wood. It was outdoors in relation to nature. And you can see from the title of this text, In Praise of Shadows, the bright versus the subtle, the shiny versus the covert. Let's say the overt versus the covert is a better balancing phrase. Science, the West brought science into the world, really, and scientifically based industrial products. Japan still, and so sad to hear of these craft traditions that are shrinking, as Reiko said, Japan has always had this absolute fascination for the handmade, for the finest craft traditions where perfection is the goal and is fought for in a way that I don't think anyone in the West, it's not that we wouldn't bother, but we wouldn't think it necessary. So I think that this, if you wanted to characterize, and this is a vast generalization, Japanese culture as opposed to the Western version, this reticence on the side of the Japanese, the subtlety rather than the pushing forward, a foregrounded quality, and what Tanizaki calls a fugitive sensibility. Now, just in conclusion, Tanizaki wrote a very important book called The Makioka Sisters, which was written in between 1943, it was serialized in 1948. My grandmother had 4 daughters, one of whom was my mother. And my favourite book growing up as a girl was Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, which was set in the American Civil War. I imagine most of the women in this audience would have read Little Women. Would you have? Everyone's nodding. I don't know about the younger ones, but it was a traditional text for girls. Wonderful, wonderful. And I found that I was able to compare the American Civil War 4 girls growing up, Beth and Meg and Jo and Amy in Little Women, my mother and her 4 sisters, Dora and Sylvia and Miriam and Helen, and then the 4 Makioka sisters, their text written in the mid-40s. And I think really the essence of Japan felt quite close to my heart. Reiko is a genius. She's she's the epitome of an entrepreneur, of a creative spirit, of a perfectionist, and of somebody who is constantly innovating. I think that it would be a tragedy if NUNO didn't continue beyond Reiko, and if the Japanese government didn't keep supporting some of the industries that are so intrinsic to the spirit of Japan. There are 4 books. I didn't realise you would have them in the store. They are here. They're currently not for sale. But if you couldn't get hold of these 4 books that are, or even one of them, that Reiko published, or NUNO published, on her endeavours, really, the most beautiful books, using as titles Japanese onomatopoeia. I don't know the meanings exactly in Japanese, but I know roughly. Kira kira, zoku zoku, fua fua, bora bora, zawa zawa, that sort of thing, meaning glittering, twinkling, or spine tingling, or spongy, or ragged and tattered. So they repeated, like any onomatopoeia, like splash. But we don't normally say splash, splash, whereas in Japanese you say the 2 words, which makes even a more colourful, I think, the result is more colourful. There are some marvellous written texts in those books. Toyo Ito, there are her sources of inspiration, weaving types, fictional stories. It sums up those books, perhaps because of my literary background, so much of Reiko and NUNO. I've described to you tonight my vertical education, grandmother, mother, aunt, myself, my growing interest in Japanese aesthetics, Japanese literature, which I'm deeply interested in, and I could not be more honoured. I could not be more honoured than to be standing here and opening the Australian Tapestry Workshop's 2015 exhibition, shop, sale, and to be present at the talk by Reiko Sudo of her NUNO Corporation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. We've had 2 wonderful conversations tonight. I mean, NUNO's past described by Reiko has been wonderful, and then Jean's wonderful rambling story from French to a deep immersion in Japanese culture. I would like to thank you both very much for doing this, and we would like to present you with, I guess, the ATW's version of the NUNO dog. 1 each, so there's no fights. Thank you. Now, there's one more item that Antonia would like to mention, so if I could ask Antonia to come to the stage, please.
Well, firstly, I'd really like to thank my wonderful team at the Australian Tapestry Workshop, who've done an extraordinary job in working very closely with the NUNO team. They have been absolutely fabulous in working across time zones and languages and so on to make this whole thing possible. So thank you so much to your marvellous team, and thank you so much to my marvellous team, and most especially Adrienne, who've worked their fingers to the bone day and night to make all this wonderful events possible. And I'd also like to pay a special tribute to a very dear colleague and friend, Andrew Sayers, who passed away last night. He's been an inspiration to many of us in this room, and his contribution to Australian art has been really quite extraordinary. So, valet Andrew. But on a final note, before I encourage you to the exhibition and the shop, I just want to give you a little memento, because Reiko is also a weaver and started her life as a weaver, so I wanted to give her some little tiny mementos of our weaving. So thank you so much for everything, Reiko. Thank you.
Okay, a final thank you. We've all said thanks to each other very nicely. So thank you all very much for coming, and can I now invite you to enjoy some hospitality and peruse the pop-up shop and the exhibition in the gallery. Thank you very much. Good evening.